tell me a story.
Prince had a problem, and an opportunity. His prolific creativity and relentless drive resulted in a growingly deep reserve of tracks amassing in the mid-80s. After the once-in-a-generation stratospheric success of the Purple Rain album, tour and film, Prince began recording tracks for his upcoming Around the World in a Day follow-up. He was also, ever since seeing the film The Idolmaker, fascinated by the idea of creating a universe of related musical acts, all rotating around Prince's central purple star. One of the acts that came into close orbit to the Minneapolis genius was Sheila Escovedo, whom Prince had maintained a relationship with since the late 70s. Sheila E., as Prince felt she should be known, was already a deeply respected musician whose drumming and percussion credits read like a who's who of musical talent at the time, including working with George Duke, Diana Ross, Lionel Richie, Marvin Gaye and Herbie Hancock. Sheila was a great fit for Prince. She was notoriously hardworking, with incredible musical knowledge, just 6 months older than Prince, with a strong, confident look and a fierce ambition. Sheila visited Prince at Sunset Sound, where he was recording, and Prince suggested that Sheila should record a solo album, breaking out from her standard role behind the skins of a band. Whilst multi-talented Sheila had recorded backing vocals previously, she was not hugely confident about being up front as a lead vocalist. This tapped directly into one of Prince's greatest talents, the ability to inspire confidence and belief in artists he worked with, just like Morris Day and Apollonia, whom both initially lacked the immediate belief that they could be front and centre point for a solo project. Prince and Sheila started their collaborative mission in a rather remarkable fashion by combining on the now iconic Erotic City groove, which Prince released as the B-side to the legendary Let's Go Crazy. Possibly one of the most defining and intriguing aspects of the album is that Prince had pretty much, in essence, recorded it before Sheila's direct involvement took place. Prince had already created a coterie of tracks for potential inclusion in other projects. Many are rumoured to have been considered for the upcoming Apollonia 6 debut album. This allowed Sheila to record her vocal versions and add her distinctive percussion expertise to the tracks in a very swift set of recording sessions in April 1984, with the album being released just 2 months later in early June. Prince was simply on fire at the moment, hoovering up the musical world with Purple Rain, Apollonia 6 and the Times Ice Cream Castles, just some of his releases escaping into the world in 1984. Now, The Glamorous Life was about to mark the public beginning of Prince and Sheila's creative union, a partnership that will be one of Prince's longest musical collaborations, stretching throughout his career. Time to dive in the back of our limousine in our attempt to explore this glamorous life.
I'm in love with the Belle of St.
The opening track, clocking in at just over 5 minutes, introduced itself with church bells and a nod to Prince's iconic flexing drum programming of the time. Indeed, the drum effect is very close to the somewhat eerie soundscape used as Prince and Apollonia begin to get acquainted in the kids' basement. The groove establishes itself with an upbeat synth-heavy vibe, which would become a staple of Prince's work throughout this time, and with loud echoing pounds of the drums, creates a somewhat paradisial landscape of sound. The track describes the hugely glamorous and alluring Belle of St. a 17-year-old figure of enormous style, Parisian influences, whom the song claims has clearly had his heart broken deeply before. Sheila's adoration for this mysterious and wounded teenage figure is not without controversy. Sheila would have been around 10 years older than the subject of her desires, and it was somewhat unusual to have a woman singing of her intrigue for someone who was not yet able to vote. Sheila was dramatic in her desire to be with the Belle of St, stating she will die otherwise. Prince also enjoys toying with androgyny, one of his recurring themes, using the term belle, which is normally used to describe female icons. Sheila, or one could argue the character she portrays in the song, seeks to slake the Belle of St Mark's pain and heal his shattered heart. The belle is described as crying as he walks the fabled streets of St Mark, although it is unclear exactly to which St Mark's location Prince refers. One could almost be forgiven for thinking this is an almost maternal, empathetic love song, but Sheila makes it clear this is not the full case, with the lines, "His erotic persuasion provokes me like no other man. The fire I have for him is undoubtedly serious." There are moments when Sheila's voice becomes more pleading, exclaiming that only she can help the belle out of his current predicament. The real hook of the track, contained in the chorus, is undoubtedly as Sheila repeats the "I'm in love" section 3 times. It ramps up the track and does stay in your mind for the rest of the day.
The second track on this album is just a pure Prince funk Minneapolis groove. The kind of jam you would rehearse with the Revolution over and over for hours and hours. Filled with an infectious synth hook, growling guitar and a funky bass to make your mama shake her thing. Prince could literally turn out these incredible funky jams in his sleep, and probably did. They just flowed effortlessly from him, especially during this mid-80s period. This funk fest is also unique as it's the first Prince-related track to be released with backmasked vocals, as this album was released just before Purple Rain and Darling Nikki's backmasked vocals. Here Prince uses his backmasked vocals as backing to the guitar, creating a freaky, nasty, growling combination which really works and sounds extremely cool. Talking guitars, Prince plays a truly funky, blistering small guitar solo. Although essentially a one-man band performance by Prince, Sheila E. does add her percussion to proceedings, but the groove is so damn funky you hardly really notice her performance in the mix. This was the height of Prince, as music critic Nelson George once said, producing a Prince production for related artists. You don't get produced by Prince, you get a Prince production. The Time, Vanity 6, Apollonia 6, The Family and Sheila E. were all part of this incredible one-man mission to record and release as much of his music as possible. It really was quite remarkable. There isn't a whole lot more to add about this funky instrumental jam other than to say, just turn it up, get your funk on and take another piece of this funky Shortberry straw cake.
I love our new rendezvous.
There's a theme of songs within the Prince canon which centre around the expectation of a night to come, a date or longed-for occasion. Tracks such as Pretty Man or Tomorrow spring to mind, and here Prince creates a truly catchy track. Its popularity amongst Prince fans was further enhanced upon the release of 2019's Originals, which featured Prince on lead vocals for this track. Prince's iconic pulsing and rebounding drum programming is reused once again here to great effect, and the deep bassy feel, combined with the slow, mesmerising synth motif, work as a perfect contrasting counterpoint to Sheila's controlled and airy delivery, which has a real ethereal touch to it. Singing of her shaking excitement around the eponymous upcoming rendezvous, deciding what to wear and how to act flood Sheila's mind. There are some very Prince-esque lines, such as, "If my bodily functions operate this way when you just call my name, I'd hate to see when we are finally playing that nasty love game." Or you could, "Show me some new tricks, my love, I'd love to be taught by you." It's one of those tracks that quite frankly glides by in a flash, and feels one that truly Sheila owns, which is certainly true in the sense that Sheila had some direct writing input into this track, rumoured to be the only track to do so. I find this track has a real summertime feel to it, and is worth repeated listens. Definitely a quiet classic.
Track 4, Oliver's House, could be considered to be the throwaway track, on what was considered a very strong debut album for one of Prince's side projects. So how does it stand up today in 2021? Well, for this listener, quite well. It has a driving beat, another earworm synth lead line that you'll be humming to yourself later on, some jangly loose guitar riffs, and a couple of interesting little jazz moments on the piano, although blink and you'll miss them. And of course, once again, Sheila adds her unmistakable percussion to proceedings. One of the most interesting parts, not only on this track, but the whole album, is the way Prince mixes the Linn drums with Sheila's percussion playing, something that makes this album stand out from some of the other side projects Prince was producing. Although there are lyrics to this track, it almost feels like an instrumental piece at times, as there are long instrumental breaks, especially towards the end of the track. Speaking of the lyrics, Oliver's House is an odd track to nail down in terms of its lyrical content. The basic premise seems to be about a musician, Oliver, who apart from throwing wild parties, is leaving soon to make a big scene, presumably in the music business.
Oliver is leaving soon, so we can make a scene. We're gonna have.
Looking more closely at some of the lyrics though, and it could be that Prince is being somewhat autobiographical here. We know what an impression his mother's dress sense had on him as a child, and how much he loved to surround himself with women dressed to the nines. We know about his legendary guitar playing and how much he loved to go cruising around in cars. So the line, "You should see his mother's room. She's got so many fine clothes. Oliver, he dressed me up and then undressed me slowly. Oliver is so weird, but he knows how to play guitar. I'm a sucker for a major chord, a ride in an open car." Oliver's House, although not the strongest track on the album, still has some interesting moments. The combination of the Linn drums with Sheila's percussion, the funky little jazz piano parts, and the earworm synth lead line make it worth your while giving it a listen. And who knows, maybe you'll end up having fun in Oliver's House too.
Next time, wipe the lipstick off your car.
This track is interestingly somewhat of a strange entity in many ways. Written by Prince, although credited to Brenda Bennett of Vanity 6 and Apollonia 6, possibly a nod to the initial plan Prince may have had for the track, it does harness the themes often central in Vanity and Apollonia 6 tracks. Here the complaint is over a lover who is clearly cheating. However, this is not what has frustrated Sheila. It's that this lover is too tired with his run-down battery to put the energy into being her lover. And Sheila makes it clear that she wants a lover and not a friend.
Can't you understand? I want a true love man. Can't you comprehend? I want a lover, not a friend.
The character Sheila portrays is happy for her lover to not take her to fancy restaurants or take her dancing. She even accepts him staying out all night, but simply bemoans the fact that he is too tired to give her some real physical attention. Indeed, Sheila decries, "If you weren't so tired, baby, we'd be on the floor, we'd be making love right now." The truly stark first impression of this track is musically the sheer pace of the track, or should I say the lack of pace, to be more accurate. It is incredibly held back, constrained and slowed down. At first it may appear that you have somehow played it at an incorrect speed. There is a little nod to a number in a musical where the character reflects by singing a soliloquy. At the 2-minute mark, Sheila seemingly compensates for this by launching into a powered rendition of the following lines. "Can't you understand? I want a true love man. Can't you comprehend? I want a lover, not a friend." Indeed, the end of the second line sees Sheila push her voice further than I've probably ever heard it go. The second half of the song does slightly ramp up the pacing with some interesting speeding and slowing vocals. However, it could be argued that one of the more important, lasting impacts of this track is the inclusion of Novi Novog on violin and Nick DeCaro on accordion, which saw the first time the instrument saw daylight on a Prince-related track. Prince would obviously go on to form many great partnerships with stringed instruments, including the extraordinary contribution made by the composer Claire Fisher. This track is never going to be the standout attention grabber of the album, but by working out some new ideas and areas to explore, Prince was creating gold for the future.
She wants to lead a glamorous life. She don't need a man.
Sheila E.'s debut album closes out with arguably the strongest track on the album. I think you've heard a rumour about it, the Glamorous Life. This is yet another infectious track by Prince, with yet another earworm lead line that will be with you all day after listening. It's a great combination of jazzy pop and Minneapolis funk combined with Sheila's unmistakable percussion playing. There is also a familiar bass drum section at the 5 minutes 30 mark, which we will later see played live but slowed down during the end of Sign of the Times on the Sign of the Times tour. Also, if you listen closely, you can just about hear Prince's vocals buried in the mix too. This track, although at 9 minutes, just breezes along, carried by the sax and the synth lead lines, and is just such a feel-good track musically. Lyrically, the track talks about a girl who wants to live the glamorous life, surrounded by materialistic things, but not a man's love, and how that type of lifestyle just leads to emptiness, and how deep down, really, she wants a man's love. She wants to lead a glamorous life. She don't need a man's touch. She wants to lead a glamorous life. Without love, it ain't much. Prince was a genius at taking relationship subjects and turning them into feel-good tracks musically, even though the lyrics may not be. Take I Could Never Take the Place of Your Man from Sign of the Times, or Do Yourself a Favour from the 1999 Deluxe for a couple of great examples. And here on The Glamorous Life we have another. The music is so good and the chorus so damn catchy that the lyrics almost become secondary to the groove, especially as the track just jams out for the last minutes. An honourable mention also has to be given to the extended version, which was included as a bonus track on the CD release of the album only. This version is pretty much more of the same, and it comes directly after the album track, so when you're listening it can feel as though it's just one long mammoth jam of a track. Also in 2019, Prince's demo version was released on the Originals album, and it's pretty close to what the final track would become on the album. In fact, sometimes it's hard to choose which version I want to listen to and prefer. The Glamorous Life brings to a close our look at Sheila E.'s debut album, a strong debut album which, with no disrespect to Sheila E. and her incredible talent, was essentially a Prince album, with Sheila's vocals and percussions added just to complete the project. Another building block in Prince's musical output and journey had just been laid.